Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Adamma sat beneath the broad-leafed almond tree in her parents' compound, located in a quiet suburb outside Lagos, trying to gather her thoughts. She was known in her family for her strong will and fierce independence. As the third daughter among 5 children, she'd always sought to distinguish herself from her siblings, excelling in her academics from secondary school straight into university, and then working tirelessly to build a small but promising clothing line that specialized in Afrocentric designs. At just 26, she had been convinced she had her entire life planned out. Marriage was going to be the ribbon that tied together her success, her dreams, and her yearning for companionship. Her fiancé, Tund, was the son of a wealthy industrialist who had made his money importing electronics and exporting cocoa. Tund had seemed so different from most men of his status. He was gentle, attentive, and supportive, at least at first. He would attend Adamma's fashion exhibitions, giving feedback on her designs, encouraging her to follow her passion for African prints. When he proposed to her during a weekend getaway to a luxurious resort in Abuja, kneeling on one knee amidst a swirl of rose petals, Adamma thought she had truly found her prince. The ring was a modest but beautiful diamond set in white gold, and the memory of that day stuck vividly in her mind. During their engagement, Tund insisted on giving her money to boost her fledgling business. Though she was apprehensive at first, because she believed in building her brand by herself, he made it seem harmless. "We're going to be a family soon," he often reminded her with a disarming smile. "Your success is mine, and mine is yours." His generosity appeared genuine, and Adamma let herself be swept away by the idea of a future where they united their strengths to build an empire, her designs and his entrepreneurial prowess. But life has a strange way of unveiling truths just when one feels most secure. Barely a year into their engagement, Tund became increasingly distant. At first, it was subtle, missed calls here and there, short text messages filled with excuses of being busy with work and under pressure from new deals. Then he started canceling their dates and family introductions last minute. Whispers filtered back to Adamma that Tund was spotted around Lagos with a younger, strikingly beautiful woman rumored to be a social media influencer. Adamma tried to dismiss it as idle gossip, trusting that Tund had no reason to betray her. After all, they were engaged, and he had given her every reason to believe he was committed to her. One evening, Tund came by her apartment, his face taut, his voice laced with tension. After a few stilted pleasantries, he dropped the bombshell she never could have anticipated. "I don't think we're right for each other anymore," he had said bluntly, refusing to look her in the eyes. The room felt like it was closing in on her. Waves of shock gripped her as she struggled to form words. "But we're supposed to get married in a few months," she murmured. "Our families are already making plans." He shrugged, neither apologizing nor offering any real explanation. "I'll refund any expenses," was the best he could muster. And just like that, her world came crashing down. Adamma's attempts to cling to hope quickly evaporated. 2 weeks after Tund's abrupt departure, she saw pictures of him and a younger woman, Adizwa, splashed across Instagram. They looked the perfect couple, Tund in a crisp white kaftan, Adizwa in a form-fitting pink gown, holding a designer clutch. The disappointment cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. Adamma felt humiliated, betrayed, and to top it all, she had to endure the prying questions from neighbors and friends about why Tund left her. Rumors, unkind and swirling, suggested that Adamma wasn't exciting enough or glamorous enough to hold a wealthy man's attention. The heartbreak took its toll on her mind and her business. She found herself short-tempered and uninspired. Some nights she would cry herself to sleep, replaying their happiest moments, wondering if she had simply been living a lie all along. Every radio jingle seemed to remind her of a memory they shared. Each new trending social media post felt like a personal assault on her wounded pride. Her supportive parents urged her to focus on the future. Her elder brother often reminded her that heartbreak wasn't the end, that she should brace herself for bigger and better things. But logic and comfort do little to temper the fire of heartbreak in the moment. Yet Adamma was not the type to wallow in despair forever. Deep inside her spirit was an ember of resilience that had been nurtured through years of balancing university lectures with her entrepreneurial hustle. After a few months of mourning the loss of her relationship, she stood before a mirror one day, stared at her puffy, tear-stained eyes, and declared she had had enough. Tund might have taken her self-esteem for a ride, but he wasn't going to rob her of her future. She got back to her sewing machine, poured her emotions into new designs, each thread symbolizing a stitch in her healing heart. She took advantage of the growing e-commerce culture in Nigeria, setting up an online store that catered to both local and international customers. Her social media following grew as she posted pictures of her original designs, vibrant Ankara gowns, minimalist attire jackets, and avant-garde Aso-oak accessories. She began to attend fashion fairs and exhibitions with renewed vigor, networking with potential buyers and forging strategic partnerships. At the same time, Tund was living the high life, or so it appeared on social media. Adizwa was known for her flamboyant lifestyle, traveling to Dubai on a whim, snapping photos at the hottest clubs in Lagos, and updating her influencer page with meticulously curated pictures. For a while, it seemed Tund was happy with his choice, parading his upgrade for the world to see. Adamma tried to shut it all out. Each time Tund's name popped up, she reminded herself of the pain he had caused and channeled that emotion into relentless ambition. Within a year of the breakup, her label, called Adamma, was starting to make waves in the fashion scene, scoring her invitations to local runway shows in Abuja, Accra, and even smaller showcases in Johannesburg. All along, there was this undercurrent of anger and betrayal that fueled her drive. But the success she steadily garnered also began to heal her heart. She discovered she had a larger capacity to dream than she had previously imagined. She realized that the heartbreak had forced her to come to terms with her own innate strength. Though she hadn't entirely forgiven Tund, far from it, she was making peace with herself and refocusing on a bigger vision, to transform her label from a niche name in African design to a globally recognized brand. Little did she know how fate, with its unpredictable sense of irony, would bring Tund back into her orbit in an unimaginable way. 2 years down the line, just when Adamma felt she had moved on completely, life would deal her a new hand. Where she once imagined Tund as the father of her children, she would now see him holding a spatula in her kitchen. It would happen so seamlessly that she would have to question if the universe was playing an elaborate trick on her. And the final twist to the story, a twist no one could have predicted, would shape not just her future, but Tund's as well, in a manner that defied all expectations. 2 years after the breakup, Adamma found herself at the grand opening of her first standalone boutique in Victoria Island, Lagos. The store was her personal triumph, a testament to her unwavering determination and growth as a fashion entrepreneur. Her initial designs, which she had once displayed in a corner stall at trade fairs, now adorned mannequins in a chic, modern space she could proudly call her own. The opening was buzzing with journalists, influencers, and even a few minor celebrities who had come to show support or to see what the hype was about. That evening, Adamma wore one of her signature pieces, a floor-length Ankara gown that hugged her curves and showcased bold red and gold motifs. She had collaborated with a local jeweler to craft a statement neckpiece that celebrated Nigerian artistry, drawing on the designs of ancient Benin. Flashbulbs ignited every few minutes as photographers captured every angle and customers perused the racks, exclaiming over the vibrancy of the fabrics and the contemporary cuts. Walking through her boutique, greeting guests, and offering styling advice, Adamma felt a renewed sense of pride. She thought back to how shattered she had been when Tund left. In that moment, the store represented both her rebirth and her refusal to be defined by heartbreak. The world still tried to bring up Tund's name every now and then, but she had trained herself to keep her composure whenever reporters asked about her past. Publicly, she would offer a polite but firm, "I wish him well," but privately, she harbored no desire to reconcile or rehash old wounds. The same night, a friend introduced her to a man named Segan, who was a renowned culinary artist in Lagos. Segan ran an upscale restaurant in Ikeja, famous for its fusion of traditional Nigerian recipes with international flavors. He was known for plating ifo riro, a vegetable stew, with the elegance of a Michelin star chef, pairing it with fancy garnishes and imported wines. His skill was unmatched, and he often showed up on TV segments talking about elevating African cuisine. The introduction happened almost casually, but sparks flew between them. They discovered they shared a passion for promoting Nigerian culture, her through fashion, him through food. Segan, just like Adan, was driven, passionate, and unapologetically proud of his roots. Within a couple of months, their professional acquaintanceship turned into a genuine friendship. They started seeing each other outside of business events, casual brunches on Sundays, a few late-night dinners after work. Unlike Tund, whose wealth had overshadowed the relationship, Segan was transparent about his struggles and triumphs. He spoke about how difficult it was to secure investors for a restaurant concept that many potential backers deemed too unconventional. But once his restaurant took off, it soared, and he never forgot those who supported him during the tough times. Adan found in Segan the mature companion she never realized she needed. He was thoughtful and considerate, never trying to overshadow her success. If anything, he reveled in it, attending her fashion shows and posting about her latest collections on social media to his followers. Over time, the idea of them dating felt natural, even fated. They shared the same hustle spirit, always striving to preserve and celebrate African heritage in the modern world. And though she was cautious about love, Adan couldn't deny the warmth that filled her chest whenever she was around him. While her personal life was blossoming in this new direction, her business kept flourishing. She was receiving orders from beyond Nigeria, clients in London, New York, and Dubai who appreciated the originality of her designs. She started employing more tailors, sales assistants, and even hired a professional brand manager to handle her company's digital presence. Everything seemed to be aligning for Adan's success. On a bright Monday morning, she received a call from a high-profile client who wanted a bespoke collection of outfits for an upcoming wedding. This client, an influential businesswoman by the name of Mrs. Abiola, was known for lavish tastes. The wedding to which the outfits pertained was rumored to be a union between two wealthy families, a ceremony that was slated to be the talk of Lagos for months to come. Excited by the opportunity, Adan quickly scheduled a meeting to discuss designs, fabrics, and timelines. When she arrived at the imposing gates of a mansion in Ikoyi later that week, she steeled her nerves, ready to impress with her sketches. The house was resplendent, reflecting the occupants' taste for opulence. She was led through the hallway and into a lounge area where she waited briefly. Moments later, a butler showed her into a sunlit sitting room decorated with gold-plated fixtures, plush sofas, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pristine swimming pool. She hadn't seen such a lavish home since the days Tund introduced her to his father's house in Banana Island. Just as she began setting up her sketches, she heard a footstep behind her. Turning around, she came face to face with none other than Tund himself. Her breath caught in her throat. For a split second, she wondered if she was hallucinating. But the man standing there was unmistakably him, albeit looking slightly leaner, his once cheerful eyes tinged with what seemed like regret or worry. His mouth fell open, likely just as shocked to see her as she was to see him. Silence hung between them until finally, Tund forced a stiff smile. "What? Hello, Adan." His voice wavered, lacking the confidence it once had. She managed a polite nod, refusing to let her emotions get the better of her. This was a professional meeting. Whatever she felt, anger, hurt, confusion, had to be reined in. "Hello, Tund," she replied formally, turning her attention back to her sketches, trying to convey that she was here for business, not a personal reunion. He appeared as though he had a million questions but wisely kept them to himself. Seconds later, Mrs. Abiola walked in, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. She greeted Adan warmly and introduced Tund as her distant relative. Adan's mind spun with the implications. Tund was connected to this family, which might mean further professional entanglements. The day's meeting went smoothly enough, with Adan presenting design ideas that wowed the client. Throughout the session, Tund hovered quietly in the background, occasionally chiming in with a polite remark, but never looking directly at Adan. When the meeting ended, Adamma gathered her sketches and excused herself. Just as she stepped into the corridor, she felt a hand lightly graze her elbow. She turned to see Tun's contrite face. "Adamma, please, can we talk for a moment?" he asked softly. For a split second, she considered refusing outright, wanting to preserve her dignity. But her curiosity, and maybe a need for closure, overruled her pride. She nodded and walked with him to a quieter section of the house. They stood near a window that overlooked the lush lawn. Tun began to speak, his voice low and laced with tension. "I know I owe you an apology and so much more. I was a fool." He swallowed hard, eyes darting around as if searching for an explanation that might redeem him. "I just want you to know that things have changed a lot. I'm not the man I used to be." Adamma listened impassively, trying to mask the swirl of emotions inside her. She recalled those sleepless nights after he dumped her. It took everything in her not to lash out. Still, she managed a measured tone. "You made your choice, Tund. You should live with it." "I know," he replied, voice trembling. "I'm not expecting forgiveness or anything. But I want you to know I truly regret how I treated you." Adamma inhaled, feeling conflicting impulses. On one hand, she wanted to maintain her sense of self-respect and dignity by not letting him see that she was still wounded. On the other hand, she sensed his remorse was genuine. "Thank you for saying that," she finally said. "I hope whatever path you're on now leads you to be a better man." With that, she turned and walked away. She felt no need to prolong the conversation or dwell on the past. Little did she realize that Tun's reappearance in her life wasn't just a fleeting intersection. Fate had a more elaborate plan, one that would soon see him stepping into a role in her life she never, ever imagined. A few weeks after the unexpected reunion with Tund, Adamma tried her best to push thoughts of him aside. She immersed herself in work, finalizing the custom order for Mrs. Abiola and simultaneously launching a new summer collection aimed at her international audience. Orders were rolling in, and she even had to hire additional hands in her factory. Life was good, busy but good. Segan remained a steady presence in her life, offering support and companionship. While their relationship hadn't fully transitioned into something official yet, the magnetic pull between them was undeniable. He would often invite her to his restaurant after hours, where he would whip up sumptuous meals while she sipped on a glass of palm wine or a fruity cocktail. They'd talk about everything: future goals, the challenges of being young African entrepreneurs, and the cultural inspirations that shaped their respective crafts. In those moments, Adamma felt deeply content, free of drama and the weight of her past. Yet the universe had other plans. One afternoon, Adamma received a phone call from an unknown number. On the other end was a distraught voice that introduced itself as Tun's mother. Adamma was surprised. She had a cordial relationship with Tun's parents back when they were engaged, but after the breakup, all communication had ceased. Tun's mother, sounding desperate, explained that Tund was in a dire situation and had fallen out with his father. She asked if Adamma could meet her for coffee, suggesting that it was a matter of utmost importance. Adamma's first instinct was to politely decline. She couldn't see why she needed to involve herself in Tun's family drama. But something in his mother's voice, an undercurrent of desperation, made her pause. The older woman had always been kind to her, even supportive in her own distant way, and Adamma felt a pang of empathy. Reluctantly, she agreed to meet at a cozy cafe nestled in Ikoyi later that week. When she arrived, Tun's mother was already seated in a corner, her regal poise somewhat marred by a worried expression. Over cups of cappuccino, she recounted how Tun's father had disapproved of Tun's recent, reckless lifestyle and cut off his monthly allowances. Then Adizwa, the younger woman for whom Tund had left Adamma, apparently turned out to be more interested in Tun's wealth than in Tund himself. Once his financial stability vanished, so did she. The relationship ended amidst rumors of infidelity and mounting debts. Now Tund was struggling to fend for himself, jobless and without any safety net. Adamma listened quietly, her emotions in turmoil. She couldn't deny there was a certain grim satisfaction in hearing that Tund's betrayal had come full circle. But she wasn't heartless. She remembered Tund's mother's kindness in the past, especially during her engagement. "I'm sorry to hear all this, Ma," she responded, trying to maintain neutrality. But I'm not sure how I can help. That's the thing, Tun's mother replied, her voice wavering. He's looking for work, any honest work, just to get back on his feet. He's actually willing to do whatever it takes. I know you've done very well for yourself. Maybe you might have some connections or an opening at your company. I'm not asking you to fix his life, just help him a little. Adamma's mind reeled. The audacity of it all left her almost speechless. How could she possibly employ the same man who jilted her so callously? But she also understood the complexities of African family ties. Tun's mother wasn't just pleading for Tund, she was, in a way, also appealing to Adamma's sense of compassion and communal duty. After a moment of silence, Adamma let out a small sigh. I don't think Tund can work in my fashion business, Ma. The environment would be too awkward. But I'll keep my ears open if any opportunities come up. Tun's mother nodded, relief washing over her features. Thank you, my dear. Even that is enough. God will bless you. Days turned into weeks, and Adamma didn't hear from Tund or his mother. She was too busy coordinating her upcoming runway showcase in Ghana to dwell on the situation. However, fate intervened again. A mutual friend told her that Tund was applying for a position as an assistant chef in Sigen's restaurant. At first, Adamma thought it was a mistake. Tund, the man who once bragged about vacations in Paris and private club memberships, applying for a job in a kitchen? But the friend insisted it was true. She decided to confront Sigen about it casually over dinner one night. They were at his place this time, a cozy apartment in Lekki Phase 1, decorated with contemporary African art and the scent of roasted peppers in the air. Sigen was stirring a pot of jollof rice when she brought up Tund's name. He turned, a look of surprise and mild amusement on his face. Yes, he did come by the restaurant asking for work. He said he's got some culinary experience now. He was apparently learning at a small bistro in Abuja for the last year or so. I think he fell on hard times. Adamma arched an eyebrow. And you're considering hiring him? Sigen shrugged, turning his attention back to the pot. We need a new line cook. The place is getting busier, and we're short-staffed. If he can prove himself, I'm willing to give him a chance. I'm not in the habit of turning away help if someone's genuinely trying to change their life. A swirl of conflicting emotions rose in Adamma's chest. Part of her wanted to warn Sigen about Tund's past, but she also valued Sigen's perspective. He believed in second chances, a trait she admired. She also didn't want to seem petty or controlling about who Sigen hired. Just be cautious, she managed to say, focusing her gaze on the swirling steam. He's got a history of being unreliable. Sigen nodded. I appreciate the heads up, but if I hire him, it'll be strictly professional. We both know personal matters shouldn't come into the workplace. That night, Adamma slept uneasily. Her dreams twisted between memories of Tund's betrayal and glimpses of him wearing a chef's apron, preparing exotic dishes. She woke the next morning feeling unsettled, but she tried to push it to the back of her mind, reminding herself that she had bigger things to worry about. Sure enough, a week later, she visited Sigen's restaurant to drop off some custom-made uniforms for the staff, beautiful aprons and chef jackets with subtle African prints. She was startled to see Tund standing behind the kitchen door, carefully tasting a stew. He looked different, less flamboyant, more subdued. Upon noticing her, he slowly put down the ladle, an unreadable expression on his face. Adamma, I didn't know you'd be coming by, he stammered. I was just delivering these uniforms, she replied curtly. I see you got the job. He nodded, wiping his hands on a towel. Chef Sigen was kind enough to give me a trial period. I'm hoping to prove myself. She gave a tight nod, handing him one of the uniform aprons. Well, good luck, she said, though she wasn't entirely certain if she meant it. Then she turned on her heels and left, heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and something else, perhaps a quiet sense of poetic justice. For a moment, she recalled the days when Tund would boast about never having to work a menial job. Now, circumstances had forced him to swallow his pride and step into a kitchen under the employ of the man who could potentially be Adamma's new love interest. That night, as she lay in bed, the events of the day played out in her mind. The irony of Tund cooking meals for Siegen, and potentially for her if she came to dine at the restaurant, was too strong to ignore. She wondered if Tund felt humiliated or if he was genuinely grateful for the chance to start anew. While part of her felt satisfied that life had come full circle, another part of her felt an odd pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to have dreams crash down around you, though hers was heartbreak, not financial ruin. Still, she firmly reminded herself that Tund was no longer her concern. She had worked too hard to rebuild her life and her self-esteem to get roped back into his world. Little did she know that the path ahead would bring them into closer contact than she ever expected, culminating in a final confrontation that would open old wounds, and perhaps forge surprising new bonds. The following month was a whirlwind for Adamma. She was invited to showcase her latest collection at a prestigious fashion week in Accra, Ghana. This was a major coup. Her brand would be displayed alongside those of top designers from different parts of Africa. The invitation alone was proof that her influence in the African fashion world was on the rise. She spent days and nights ensuring every stitch, every design detail met her high standards. She oversaw fabric selections, approved final fittings, and held rehearsals for models who would strut the runway wearing her pieces. Through all of this, Siegen was her rock, sending daily messages of encouragement and even whipping up quick takeout meals for her staff when the workload got intense. However, she couldn't avoid hearing updates about Tund's progress in the restaurant's kitchen. Several times, she visited Siegen's restaurant for official or casual reasons, and she'd catch glimpses of Tund carefully plating a dish or chopping vegetables in the background. Their interactions were minimal, polite greetings if they happened to cross paths, but little else. Part of her was glad. Any more interaction, and old resentments could easily resurface. Nevertheless, she couldn't shake off the curiosity of how Tund, formerly an emblem of financial stability and social clout, had adjusted to the role of a line cook. According to Siegen, he was actually a fast learner. He paid attention to detail, arrived on time, and showed respect for the culinary craft. Adamma would catch snippets of conversation, "Tund's stew is on point," or "the new cook has a knack for seasoning." It all felt surreal, yet oddly normalizing. In a strange way, she respected anyone willing to put in real work, no matter their background. As she was preparing to leave for Accra, an unexpected invitation arrived. Mrs. Abiola's lavish wedding party was scheduled to take place just 2 days before Adamma's flight. The family had requested that Adamma present her designs as part of a special fashion segment during the ceremony. In high society Lego circles, big weddings often featured entertainment, fashion shows, and elaborate performances. For Adamma, this was a chance to gain even more visibility among influential guests. She quickly accepted, even though it meant juggling rehearsals and last-minute modifications for both the wedding event and the upcoming Accra Fashion Week. On the day of the wedding, Adamma arrived early at a 5-star hotel's grand ballroom. Decorated with silver drapes, cascading floral arrangements, and shimmering chandeliers, the venue was the embodiment of opulence. The bride and groom's families had spared no expense. Adamma's models, 8 graceful women and 4 men, practiced their brief runway walk in a sectioned-off area while she checked the outfits for any final adjustments. She was so focused on her work that she barely noticed when Tund slipped into the room. He stood there in a crisp white uniform, evidently part of the catering staff that Siegen's restaurant had organized for the event. The moment she spotted him, her heart gave a little jolt, but she composed herself. Tund kept a respectful distance, his eyes briefly meeting hers in a silent greeting. Time had certainly changed them both, and she realized this was the first time they were in close proximity for an extended period. The fashion segment went flawlessly. Adamma's bold patterns and modern cuts earned appreciative murmurs from the affluent audience. Some even stood to applaud at the end, cameras flashing as her models posed for the final tableau. Once she wrapped up, she stepped aside to catch her breath and watch the wedding proceed from behind the scenes. That was when Tund approached, carrying a tray of champagne flutes. I just wanted to congratulate you," he said softly. "That show was incredible." She gave him a polite nod, still catching her breath. "Thank you. It means a lot," she responded, not wanting to be impolite. A single bead of sweat trickled down her temple, but she kept her composure. He looked around, making sure no one was within earshot. "You've become very successful," he noted quietly. "I always knew you were talented, but this is on another level." Adamma felt a flicker of conflicting emotions. She wanted to remain gracious. "Well, I had to move on with my life," she said, a tad coolly. "I'm glad you've also found something worthwhile to do." He bowed his head slightly. "I know it must feel strange, seeing me here serving champagne. But I'm trying my best to rebuild. I appreciate what Segan has done for me." She looked at him carefully. The man before her seemed humbled, stripped of the arrogance that once clouded his demeanor. She remembered Tund from years ago, so certain of his privileged future. Now, he was grateful for the chance to serve canapés to wedding guests. "If you're truly changing for the better, then that's good," she said, measured. "We all have to find our path." Their conversation ended when a flurry of guests arrived, clamoring for the champagne on his tray. Adamma walked away, returning to her team and focusing on the finishing touches of the show. Despite herself, she felt a twinge of respect for Tund's humility. She hoped it wasn't just an act. Later, Segan found her backstage, a wide grin on his face. He planted a quick kiss on her cheek, a display of affection that clearly caught Tund's eye from across the room. "Brilliant show, love. You blew everyone away." She smiled back, letting his warm energy envelop her. "Thanks. Couldn't have done it without your moral support." After the wedding wrapped up, the staff cleared the venue. Tund kept to himself, diligently stacking dishes and directing other kitchen staff on the cleanup. Adamma's models drifted away, chattering about how spectacular the event was. Segan and Adamma lingered a bit longer, ensuring the last of the catering supplies were accounted for. Suddenly, a shrill scream from the hallway startled everyone. One of the caterers, a young lady, came running, tears streaming down her face. "Help! Something's happened to Chef Segan's staffer." She led them to a small side corridor where Tund lay slumped against a wall, sweating profusely and grimacing in pain. Adamma's heart lurched. She rushed forward with Segan, calling his name urgently. Tund's face was contorted with agony, and he clutched his left side as if he could barely breathe. Segan immediately kneeled and checked Tund's pulse. It was erratic and rapid. "We need to get him to a hospital." Segan barked at the staff. Without hesitation, Adamma and two of the servers helped lift Tund to his feet. He seemed barely conscious, muttering incoherently. They managed to get him into Segan's car, and Adamma slid into the back seat to support him while Segan drove. At the hospital, chaos ensued. Nurses rushed Tund onto a gurney and wheeled him into the emergency ward, leaving Adamma and Segan pacing the waiting area. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a stark glare on the pale tiles and plastic chairs. Adamma's heart pounded, memories flooding back of the time she once cared deeply for Tund. Despite all the heartbreak, seeing him in such a vulnerable state rattled her. She realized that while she might not love him anymore, she certainly didn't want harm to befall him. After what felt like hours, a doctor approached. "He's stable now," the doctor announced, "but he has acute appendicitis. We need to operate immediately." Segan gave his consent as Tund's employer and the person who brought him in, and Adamma also nodded anxiously. Paperwork was signed, and Tund was wheeled away for surgery. The night stretched on. Segan tried to get Adamma to go home and rest, but she refused. She felt compelled to stay, unsettled by a swirl of guilt, empathy, and lingering memories. By the time the surgery concluded, it was almost dawn. The doctor emerged to inform them that the procedure had gone smoothly and Tund would need a few days of recovery. Relief washed over Adamma, followed by exhaustion. When Tund finally regained consciousness, he groggily thanked them for not leaving him behind. His eyes were glassy from medication, but the gratitude in his tone was palpable. Overcoming her hesitation, Adamma managed a reassuring smile. "Just focus on getting better." She glanced at Segan, who nodded in agreement. Despite everything, they were still human beings in a shared community, bound by a moral thread of care and compassion. Adamma left the hospital with Segan by mid-morning, the city already alive with traffic and the bustle of commerce. She sank into the passenger seat, eyes heavy, mind racing. She didn't know if she had the capacity for more emotional turmoil in her life. But one thing was certain: the lines of their past and present had blurred in an unprecedented way. Tund was now, in some capacity, a part of their everyday reality. Little did she suspect just how deeply intertwined their lives would become before all was said and done. During Tund's hospital stay, Sigan and Adan took turns checking on him. Though Adan was juggling final preparations for the Accra Fashion Week, she still found moments to drop by with fresh fruits or a flask of pepper soup, something to comfort him and aid his recovery. She kept her visits short and to the point, never allowing them to veer into personal territory. Yet each time she entered the hospital room, Tund's eyes lit up with a look of profound gratitude that she couldn't quite ignore. On one such visit, Tund mustered the energy to speak more candidly. "I never thanked you properly, Adan," he began, his voice still raspy. "Not just for helping me get to the hospital, but for not turning your back on me." She stood by his bedside, arms crossed gently. "It was the right thing to do," she answered, offering a small smile. "Anyone else would have done the same." He winced slightly, shifting in the bed. "Not everyone, especially after what I did," he said in a subdued tone. He paused, swallowing any further admission. "You're a good person. That hasn't changed." Adan felt an odd sense of closure hearing those words. Maybe she didn't need his acknowledgement, but a part of her found it healing. Tund, who once broke her heart, was now seeing the consequences of his choices and recognizing her kindness. She nodded, feeling a hint of sympathy for him. "Focus on resting," she advised, changing the subject before it got too emotional. A day before she was set to leave for Ghana, Tund was discharged. Sigan offered to let Tund recover in his spare bedroom for a week, as Tund's cramped apartment in a rundown area of the mainland wasn't ideal for post-surgery care. Sigan's house was comfortable, secure, and quiet. Adan applauded his generosity but maintained her distance. She had a runway show to orchestrate, and the last thing she needed was emotional distractions. The Accra Fashion Week turned out to be a stunning success. Adan's collection received rave reviews from critics and fellow designers. She made valuable connections, including prospective clients from Senegal, South Africa, and even France who were eager to explore potential collaborations. On the final night of the event, a sense of triumph and relief washed over her. She dined with other designers at a hip restaurant overlooking the city's skyline, sipping on a chilled glass of hibiscus tea and savoring the moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, her mind was free of Tund's looming presence. But fate had other plans. Upon her return to Lagos, she learned that Tund had nowhere to go once Sigan's hospitality period ended. Tund's father had effectively disowned him, due to a combination of Tund's betrayal of the family's trust and mounting debts. With minimal savings and no stable family support, Tund was in dire straits. Though he'd proven himself competent at the restaurant, Sigan could only offer so many hours on the schedule, and the pay was modest for an entry-level cook. Without a permanent place to stay, Tund risked losing his job and ending up homeless. Sigan sat Adan down one evening, broaching the subject delicately. "I'm considering letting Tund move into the staff quarters behind my restaurant until he can stand on his own feet," he told her, stirring a pot of egusi soup on the stove. "But it needs some renovations. I'd have to invest a bit in making it livable." Adan raised an eyebrow. "That's quite generous. But why are you going to such lengths for him?" Sigan turned off the stove, the aroma of melon and spices mingling in the air. "Because I believe people can change, and I see him trying. Yes, he made mistakes, but who hasn't? He's ashamed of his past, and he's working to fix his life. If there's a chance I can help another Nigerian youth avoid a downward spiral, why not try?" Touched by Sigan's compassion, Adan sighed. She couldn't fault him. She knew better than anyone the value of second chances, albeit in a different context. "Just be careful. I don't want you to be taken advantage of." Sigan gave her a small smile. "Don't worry, love. I'm not naive. I'm just extending a hand. Let's see if he takes it with sincerity." Over the next few weeks, renovations on the staff quarters commenced. Adan rarely saw Tund during that time. Between her busy schedule and his assigned shifts, they existed in parallel worlds. But one Saturday afternoon, she received a call from Segan who sounded flustered. "Adan, can you come to the restaurant? Tund needs help with something personal, and I have to handle a crisis in the kitchen." She debated ignoring the request, but her conscience wouldn't let her. Within half an hour, she arrived at the restaurant, finding Tund in a side office, hunched over a table, seemingly in pain. Worried, she approached him. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Tund looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. "I had a call from my father's lawyer," he began weakly. "Apparently, some debts under my name have escalated, and they're threatening legal action. I just don't know what to do." He clutched a few documents in shaking hands. "I don't have the resources to cover this. My father won't help, and I can't possibly ask my mother again. She's already drained her savings." Adan carefully took the documents, scanning them. They were mostly overdue credit card bills and personal loans he took out during his time with Adizwa. The sums weren't astronomical, but for someone on a line cook's salary, they were insurmountable. "Why call me?" she asked, although she knew the answer. He had nobody else. "I'm not asking you for money," Tund clarified immediately, catching the defensive note in her voice. Segan said maybe you'd know a lawyer or someone who could negotiate a repayment plan or something. I'm desperate here." Her initial instinct was to turn him away. This was the man who once broke her heart, who boasted about never needing anyone. But she saw the raw fear in his eyes, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. She recalled how alone she had felt when Tund cast her aside. Though her situation had been emotional rather than financial, the sense of isolation was something she could empathize with. Slowly she let out a breath. "I do know a lawyer who might help," she conceded. "He's worked with me on contracts for my business. I'm not promising miracles, but maybe he can negotiate the terms." Relief washed over Tund's face. "Thank you, Adan. You have no idea how much this means." She nodded curtly, still grappling with conflicting emotions. "I'll set up a meeting. But after that, it's up to you to follow through." In the ensuing days, Adan connected Tund with her lawyer, a sharp professional named Chike who agreed to take on Tund's case at a reduced fee out of respect for Adan. Their first meeting was tense but productive, with Chike outlining steps to consolidate the debt and propose a structured repayment plan to the creditors. Tund, for his part, looked both anxious and determined. He was stepping into a new world, one where he had to rely on the charity of others and face the consequences of his past head-on. As time passed, Tund settled into the staff quarters behind Segan's restaurant. He worked diligently, taking extra shifts whenever possible to make more money. He sometimes assisted with inventory checks or learned new recipes, hoping to elevate his skill set. The initial awkwardness between him and Adan softened into a kind of civil cordiality. She would drop by the restaurant, and if she ran into Tund, they'd have a brief exchange, perhaps about a new menu item or an update on the legal case, then part ways. Gradually, Adan came to see Tund not as the villain of her heartbreak, but as a flawed individual trying to rebuild. Her sense of vindication gave way to a nuanced understanding that life wasn't simply black and white, especially in the fluid social and economic realities of modern African urban life. She didn't forget the pain he'd caused her, but she no longer defined him by that alone. And in the background, her relationship with Segan deepened. He admired her for offering Tund a bit of assistance when she had every right to ignore him. She admired Segan's unwavering compassion and moral fortitude. They continued to explore their shared dreams of expanding their businesses and promoting African excellence. In the hush of late-night conversations, they even discussed marriage, children, and the impact they wanted to make in their community. Yet there was an undercurrent of tension neither of them spoke about openly. Tund's presence was a constant reminder of the past. It was as if an invisible thread connected them all, winding tighter with each passing day. None of them could foresee the final jolt of destiny, the one that would shatter any illusions of normalcy and force each of them to confront truths they had long suppressed. Months rolled by, and life at Segan's restaurant found its new rhythm. Tund had become an integral part of the kitchen crew, proving himself adept at preparing signature dishes like jollof rice topped with suya-spiced chicken and innovative twists on Nigerian soups. Customers and staff alike came to appreciate his ever-improving culinary skills. Adamma's lawyer managed to restructure Tun's debts into more manageable monthly installments, relieving some of his financial burden. While it would still take him years to clear his name, he at least had a path forward. For Adamma, business was booming. She opened a second boutique in Abuja and was in talks to collaborate with a major international retail chain. Chike, for his part, was testing new menu ideas and scouting possible locations for a second restaurant. Their relationship, blossoming with each milestone, had grown into a deep partnership. They treated each other as equals, each supporting the other's endeavors, celebrating wins, and being a safety net for any setbacks. One bright Saturday morning, Adamma decided to drop by Chike's restaurant unannounced. She had just acquired a shipment of premium coffee beans from Ethiopia and thought he might like to experiment with them in his beverage offerings. As she entered through the back entrance, she glimpsed Tund in the staff lounge, carefully removing a batch of puff-puff, fried dough, from a deep fryer. He noticed her arrival and offered a small, respectful nod. She gave a nod back. "Morning. I didn't know you'd be here this early." He shrugged, placing the hot pastries on a cooling rack. "Saturdays are busy, so I wanted to get a head start." Adamma ventured closer, curiosity piqued by the sweet aroma. "Trying out new recipes?" she asked, examining the puff-puff that glistened under the kitchen lights. "Yeah." Chef Chike suggested a twist, maybe filling them with custard or fruit. "He's open to experimenting, which is good for me to learn more." She smiled, remembering how Tund used to shy away from any form of manual labor. "Seems like you've come a long way." "I have," he admitted softly. "And I owe a lot of it to both you and Chike." He paused, as if weighing whether to continue. "You know, I once mocked people who worked in kitchens. I was so arrogant, thinking money would always be there. I never imagined I'd find genuine satisfaction in cooking for others. But here I am." Adamma found herself touched by the sincerity in his voice. Before she could respond, however, the lounge door swung open, and Chike burst in, phone in hand, his face clouded with concern. "Adamma, I've been calling you," he began. "We need to talk, something's happened." She tensed at his serious tone. "Is everything all right?" He shook his head gravely. "I just got a call from my younger sister in Ibadan. Our mother has collapsed. They suspect a stroke." Adamma's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Chike, I'm so sorry. Do you need me to come with you?" He nodded, eyes distant with worry. "Yes, please. I'm going to drive down there immediately. I need your support. And I'm not sure how long I'll be away." Without hesitation, Adamma agreed. Tund, sensing the gravity of the situation, interjected softly, "Don't worry about the restaurant. I'll manage the kitchen until you're back, chef." Chike gave a tight, grateful smile. "Thank you, Tund." Within an hour, Adamma found herself in the passenger seat of Chike's SUV, headed out of Lagos to Ibadan. The usually bustling roads seemed eerily quiet as worry gnawed at their minds. The journey felt longer than usual, heavy with tense silence. They arrived at the hospital to find Chike's mother in the intensive care unit, attached to machines that beeped ominously. Doctors confirmed it was a severe stroke, and the prognosis was uncertain. The next 48 hours would be critical. Chike was beside himself with anxiety. Adamma stayed by his side, offering reassurances and praying alongside him. The family house in Ibadan became their temporary base. Nights blurred into days, filled with hospital visits and heartfelt discussions about life's fragility. Chike's mother, a proud woman who once taught both of them how to be strong in the face of adversity, now lay motionless except for slight twitches. After several sleepless nights, the doctors reported small but steady improvements. Chike's mother began to show signs of partial responsiveness, and hope glimmered. Realizing she was stable enough to continue receiving care, Chike turned to Adamma one morning and said, "You should head back to Lagos. You have a business to run. I'll stay here a bit longer, until we're certain she's out of danger." Adamma hesitated, not wanting to leave him in such a vulnerable time. But he insisted, reminding her of looming deadlines and meetings she couldn't afford to miss. With a heavy heart, she agreed. She embraced him, promising to return soon if the situation worsened. Her drive back to Lagos was somber, each kilometer punctuated by flashbacks of her own father's hospitalization years ago. The fragility of life weighed on her. But upon her arrival at the restaurant, she was met with a scene she never expected. Tund hastily stuffing clothes into a tattered duffel bag in the staff quarters, tears streaming down his cheeks. Her instincts flared. "What's going on?" she asked, stepping into the modest room, which smelled faintly of disinfectant and cooking oil. Tund turned, face contorted with anger and sorrow. "I'm leaving," he croaked. "I've ruined everything." Adan stood firm, arms folded, determined to get to the bottom of it. "What do you mean, ruined everything? Start talking." He sank onto the small bed, duffel bag dropping to the floor. "Some men came by earlier. Debt collectors. They found out where I work and threatened to seize equipment from the restaurant if I don't make my next payment, money I don't have yet. I begged them to give me more time, but they said they're not leaving empty-handed." His voice quivered. "I can't let Chef Segan's business suffer because of me. He's done too much. So I'm leaving. Let them hunt me, but I won't let them touch his property." Adan's heart pounded. She had thought the debt situation was under control, but evidently not. "Calm down," she said, trying to steady her own nerves. "We'll figure this out." She took a breath and reached for her phone. "I'll call Uche, our lawyer. Maybe there's something we can do legally to stop them from seizing anything." Tund shook his head violently. "No. I won't drag you or Segan into my mess any further. This is my cross to bear. I already owe you to my life." She placed a hand on his shoulder, something she never imagined doing in this lifetime. "Stop. Look, running won't solve anything. You'll lose your job, the restaurant will lose a good cook, and Segan's business might still suffer negative publicity." Tund buried his face in his hands, sobbing quietly. "I just don't know what else to do. Every step forward, something pushes me back." Against all logic, Adan found herself dialing her bank account manager. In a swift, almost surreal move, she arranged a short-term loan in her name, enough to cover Tund's overdue payment and buy time for a more permanent arrangement. Tund stared at her in disbelief, tears glistening in his eyes. "Why would you do that for me?" She inhaled deeply, tears threatening to spill from her own eyes. "Because sometimes we need a big gesture of compassion to change the course of our lives. You once gave me funds for my fashion business, remember?" she said, recalling the early days of her label when Tund had indeed supported her financially. "Consider this me returning the favor. But make no mistake, this is a loan. You'll repay every naira, even if it takes you years." Tund nodded fervently, relief and astonishment mixed on his face. "I will. I promise." Within hours, Uche was on the case, obtaining a stay on any attempts by the debt collectors to seize restaurant property, contingent on Tund making consistent repayments. After the dust settled, Tund clung to Adan, whispering a broken, "thank you," over and over. It was a strange, emotional moment that left Adan shaken. She realized how deeply empathy could stretch, how it could bridge even the largest rifts of betrayal. Days later, a drained Segan returned to Lagos, his mother's condition slowly improving. When he learned of the crisis that had erupted in his absence, and how Adan had stepped in to rescue Tund, he was initially stunned into silence. Then he enveloped Adan in a tight embrace. "You've got the biggest heart," he murmured. "I'm so proud of you." Shortly after, he sought Tund out. The two men talked at length in Segan's private office, the conversation punctuated by Tund's remorseful tone and Segan's quiet nods. By the time they emerged, there seemed to be a new understanding and respect between them. Shortly after, he sought Tund out. The two men talked at length in Segan's private office, the conversation punctuated by Tund's remorseful tone and Segan's quiet nods. By the time they emerged, there seemed to be a new understanding and respect between them. No one, however, anticipated the next revelation. As Tund strove to show gratitude, he began assisting Adan in her second boutique's shipments and occasionally volunteering to help with her fashion events. His culinary background was surprisingly useful. He arranged backstage catering for models during an event in Abuja, ensuring they had healthy snacks and refreshments. Through these acts, Tund and Adan found a fragile new dynamic, neither lovers nor enemies, but something akin to allies in their shared orbit around Siegen. One evening, after a busy day of coordinating shipments, Tund fell ill again. This time, it wasn't physical. He fainted at Adan's boutique, and when he came to, he was delirious. Panicking, Adan called for an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors discovered Tund had dangerously high blood pressure, likely exacerbated by stress. In his half-conscious state, he mumbled confessions, how he felt guilty for ever leaving Adan, how he admired Siegen's kindness, how he dreamed of atoning for his mistakes. And here came the unexpected ending no one saw coming. On the cusp of Tund's discharge, Siegen walked into the hospital room, carrying an envelope. Adan, by his side, looked on curiously. Without preamble, Siegen placed the envelope in Tund's hands. Inside was an official letter, typed neatly on restaurant stationery. "You're not just a line cook anymore," Siegen declared, voice solemn. "I'm offering you a partnership. A minority stake in my future second restaurant. You've proven yourself in the kitchen, and now I want you to invest what you can, your time, your skill, your passion. Let's build something bigger together." Tund's eyes widened in shock. He looked at Adan, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. "I don't know if I deserve this," he rasped. Adan spoke softly, echoing the sentiment that had come to define their entwined journey. "This isn't about deserving. It's about possibilities and redemption." Tund accepted the offer, voice choked with emotion. And in that moment, the three of them, Adan, Siegen, and Tund, realized they had formed an unlikely family of sorts. Their bond, tested by betrayal, heartbreak, and adversity, had led to a future none of them had predicted. The man who once abandoned Adan at the altar of broken promises had become not only her cook but, in a twist, was now a burgeoning entrepreneur under the guidance of her new love. As the months turned into years, they grew into a supportive network. Tund managed the kitchen in Siegen's second restaurant, eventually paying off his debts and fulfilling his promise to Adan. Siegen expanded his culinary empire, and Adan's fashion line went global. The three remained connected through every success and challenge, proof that sometimes life's most painful closures pave the way to extraordinary second chances. And so it ended, a story that began with heartbreak and ended in an unexpected alliance, each individual transformed by trials, each step forging a future woven with grace, forgiveness, and hope. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.